Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the breakout session. I'm not going to waste our valuable time introducing everyone and their titles. You can see, that on the screen. So I'm Lauren. It's great to be here with you. I'm joined by Jason from AWS, and two of my favorite clients, and I'm not just saying that because they're sitting here, Rolf and Roopa from ABSA. For this session, we really are going to be having a conversation about the journey that we've walked as three partners, and hopefully what we'll share is just some of the lessons that we've learned, really walking this journey with SAP and to the cloud. Earlier Aki asked me, what do you think sums up this discussion? And I think it really is about powerful partnerships and organizations coming together. And hopefully you'll get an essence of what some of that has meant for our organizations. So I think let's get straight into it. First up we've got Jason here, one of the international guests that Reg mentioned. Jason, you spend a lot of time with clients both locally and internationally. What are some of the key drivers that are coming up when clients are talking about moving SAP to the cloud? And what are some of the key concerns that are being raised, both local in the South African and international markets?
Thanks very much, and it's great to be here, and thank you for inviting me. I think the answer to the first question is perhaps bring out the topic of the whole of this conference, really. The answer to the question is it depends on whether we're going kind of down the RISE construct, or we call it within AWS the native construct in terms of the benefits of moving. Let me just sort of discuss the native, because the previous speakers we had on the stage, they were discussing both RISE and native. But from a native perspective, the benefits that customers are seeing of moving SAP workloads to AWS in that native context is really speed and velocity. Okay, so some of the things that you can do with SAP workloads versus what I'll call on-prem workloads are they seem like the obvious, but scalability, up, but more importantly, scalability downwards as well. So that is something that is really kind of attractive. And you've seen it, of course, from AWS or Amazon's point of view. The COVID situation, we saw a huge rise. But of course, on the other side of the equation, if you're on the airline business, you saw obviously the complete opposite. So, the moving SAP workloads to the cloud means that you can deal with both. You can go up, and of course, you can come down as well. The other areas that we're seeing customers enjoy is some of the DevOps capabilities that you can drive within AWS. Maybe CloudWatch, for example, using the backup capability, the AWS backup capability, which can include SAP data. And then what we're also seeing, and it's really special, and we're really excited about it at the moment, is the ability to potentially extend at the edge. And what I mean by that is, I'm not here about changing the core. Okay, we're all in agreement that the core shouldn't be touched, and the previous speakers also discussed that as well. But, we just released capabilities like our ABAP SDK. Okay, and what that allows you to do is in 5 or 7 lines of code, for example, you can start integrating all of the AWS cloud native services to SAP. And we're seeing some brilliant use cases in that sense. So it's all about also combining, the benefit of combining that AWS 300 plus services to SAP, both from a process and maybe from a data perspective. That's one of the other things. Now, 2 questions you asked there. Those are all of the things and reasons why customers are potentially looking to move their SAP systems to AWS. What are the concerns? I think the one word that I hear consistency is latency. Okay, there is, and I understand why, but there is a fear around latency. The idea that it is in your building or very close to your building versus perhaps not in your building or outside of your network, let's call it for a second. That gives a lot of people a lot of concerns. I was in Kenya last week before coming here. Every conversation I had with customers was about latency, etc. And The great thing about the cloud is you can test it. You can try it. You know, we can spin up an SAP S4 environment in 45 minutes in any region that you fancy. You know, here in Cape Town, for example, we have a beautiful region built exactly the same as every other region in AWS. Try it, test it. We'll spin up the S4 environment. You know, you can connect into the POP and try it out. And I saw, again, borrowing from the previous speakers, you know, 2 of those customers had their SAP workloads running in Frankfurt. You know? So I think latency is still a fear. Second fear is security. And of course, wonderful to be on stage here with ABSA, where that's kind of day zero or ground zero in terms of a requirement, particularly in the banking regulated world. But security is also a fear. But when you educate and understand yourself the capabilities of AWS around security, you quickly kind of can realize that the security we've got is better than what you have within your own organization. You know, you need to spend a lot of money in security to keep it at where it needs to be to protect your organization or your customers. And security is a big fear. But for me and for AWS, you know, that's ground zero piece of work for us. So again, nothing to worry about. So some of the benefits and perhaps some of the fears that we're seeing from SAP workloads.
Great. Thanks so much, Jason. And I think let's maybe get a bit of, you know, ABSA's perspective. So, you know, Roopa, ABSA has been on a journey specifically to land SAP in AWS. Can you talk us through some of the reasons that you made this decision, and, you know, really what's your experience been so far?
So I think our reasoning was really twofold. One was the lifespan of ECC6 coming to an end in 2027. And then the second one was we had already started a relationship with AWS in terms of a cloud strategy within the bank. So moving to AWS made sense. I think that our experience has been, I'll say, phenomenal. We've been able to do our S4 migration in a phased approach. So we were able to leverage everything from a cloud computing perspective, scalability, reliability. We could up and downgrade as much as we wanted to. I think your concern about latency, I think that was one of our fears as well. And I think ours sitting in Ireland made no difference to us. It's actually been fantastic in terms of latency. We spoke about security, the fact that we have like our hardened MI images. We make sure those are tested. We've had pen tests on it. So I think our experience has been great, but I think it's also been because we've had great partnership with everyone. So we've had a great partnership with AWS, with DD, with SAP. Together, we've kind of delivered this in a really, I would say, seamless manner. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Roopa. Rolf is a coup at ABSA, so really has quite a strong business hat in terms of, you know, his portfolio. So we've touched on some of the technical benefits, Rolf, but, you know, so much of what we've, you know, heard in the sessions as well as what we heard in the previous session, a lot of stakeholders to get on board to make this journey successful. What were some of the lessons that you've learned, some of the experiences that you could share with the audience around, you know, doing this successfully?
Thanks, Lauren. Yeah, so they say bankers are difficult, and yeah, we are quite difficult. And I think when we made the decision to go AWS SAP and partnership with DD, I think AWS had an idea, and which was a little story I'll just show you, which kind of sold the business. Is you know, we're the first bank to go SAP HANA on AWS in South Africa, but how we sold it to our business is AWS had quite a big retail client in Cape Town. We literally took our 2 big finance executives with us on a plane to Cape Town, sat in front of Pick and Pay, and the cool thing AWS did is they actually got out the room, which was nice, because they allowed us to question this retailer and go, what went wrong, what went right, how did it work? So the concept of almost letting their product talk for themselves and learning what that supplier or vendor had gone through in the and you know, to Roopa's point, what we learned very quickly with this particular customer was the word partnerships and how you do things together. It's like if you both fail, we all fail. There's no such thing as it's AWS's fault or ABSA's fault. And we learned that pretty quickly. And you know, we came home from that trip and we then and there said we're putting HANA on the cloud. And that's going to be for all of our banks across the continent. And AWS has delivered to the T on every single element of it. I mean, the partnership element has been phenomenal, and being able to talk to their other customers gives you a sense of comfort that, you know, can you do this? what are the risks, what do you need to watch out. So that actually went down really well.
Awesome. Thank you, Rolf. It's so important to bring the business on the journey, which I think is often overlooked. So Jason, clients often have different business drivers. We've heard from 4 great speakers before us. We've heard from the ABSA team today. What's the process or best practice for understanding what is the right cloud model for an organization? And really, what does AWS advocate for when, before you start this journey? How do you get started? How do you evaluate your options in the context of, what is a pretty big transformation?
Absolutely, and we've engineered this to the T, because we've got hundreds of thousands of customers that have taken a similar journey, not necessarily just for SAP workloads, but of course for other native workloads. And we've created, which is quite a well-known program now called MAP, Migration Acceleration Program is what it stands for, MAP. And really it's about 3 phases. Firstly, assess, where we help customers build the business case to moving to the cloud, because the journey isn't just technology, it's also about a business case that we build upon the expertise of migrating, as I say, hundreds of thousands of customers across the world to. And we bring that knowledge to the customer, both in terms of the tooling that we provide. So we provide a number of pieces of tooling for this. So first of all, it's about the assess. And then the next phase is what we call mobilize, which is we're getting ready for the journey. So, one of the fundamentals and one of the most important parts is that you need to build a landing zone. And if you're in ABSA, you need to make sure that landing zone is built like bulletproof for it. So you need to make sure that we invest there and we deliver the right skills to make sure those players are there as well. And then the third phase is when it happens, which is the migrate phase and then the modernize phase. We call that, migrate and modernize. So, we have tooling ourselves that within AWS that automate the actual migration of some workloads. Or we have the skills of dimension data and borrowing upon your skills to help customers move their physical workloads over to AWS. And the other important thing from an SAP point of view is downtime. That's something that we sometimes not forget. But you unless you're working in the SAP world, you don't remember it, which is, you've got to make sure that you're doing near zero downtime migrations, and that's something that you also need to build in. But the journey doesn't stop there. Once you've done the migration, then we want to be able to get some more value about using these cloud native services. So we want to do the modernize phase as well. This is about making sure that you can utilize the capability of these beautiful new native cloud services that are available at your fingertips to use as well. So that's another area. Finally, before I hand the mic back, again, previous speaker, they actually said dual running cost. That's another thing there. If you look at the actual cost of moving to the cloud, there is a hump there, and let's be honest about it. Moving to the cloud, there is a dual running cost. There's a little bump before you actually start seeing the cost of economy coming down. And the actual MAP program that we run also supports customers commercially to reduce and, in fact, remove that hump cost. We're seeing with SAP workloads that AWS invests in an extraordinary way. We extra invest on moving SAP workloads. And we do that because it's super important that workload moves over. The SAP workload moves over to AWS. So we extra invest in SAP workloads from a commercial point of view to support and make that journey commercially safe as well. So lots going on there.
Lots going on. Thanks, Jason. So I'm actually going to go to Roopa because I'm jumping around a little bit. So I think what we've certainly heard is there's lots of great stuff, that's happened, but none of these projects, I think anyone in SAP or cloud in the room knows that no project comes without a few stumbling blocks and obstacles. What are some of, Roopa, from ABSA's perspective, what were some of these obstacles? What should the audience watch out for, on this journey?
I think for us, the biggest part is making sure you have a really good cloud strategy partner. You make sure you have your rails in place. You understand where you're going as an organization. Because I think the biggest stumbling block is it's so easy to switch on instances. It's so easy to get carried away, and the costs keep rising. So sometimes you'll actually just miss the fact that these servers, for example, are running, and your cost is increasing. So I think that's very important to make sure you have the right tagging, the right systems in place to monitor, to continuously evaluate where you're going. I think the second one for us was really around regulators, how to get them over the line to make sure that we could continue the way we were. The third one was really around learning, and I think what we did really well as an organization is we have a cloud incubator program, and that then allows us to basically train people in the cloud with AWS. It's a fantastic partnership we have, and I think that also helps, because once you train internally as well and everybody understands, it's easier to move to the cloud. Yeah.
Great, thanks. And Rolf, when you have a look at, the business transformation, we look at, what the role SAP plays in our organizations. It's often I hear it referred to as like, the heart of the organization is the core. So business is really critical in terms of engaging with you. What were some of the key success factors, for ABSA, engaging with business stakeholders, providing a service back into, ABSA from a business point of view?
So I think the easiest way for me to describe this is a matter of choice. And I think the relationship with both DD and AWS, I think everybody's pretty familiar with ABSA's background of being owned by Barclays, and it was a very, Big Daddy told us what to do the whole time. And what's been great about this journey in the last 2 years is everything we do now has an element of flexibility to it, which is really powerful. The way we run our managed service with Dimension Data, bringing staff in and out the whole time. With AWS, the various different pricing plans that we can literally change yearly as we need to. Bankers are synonymous with counting their money, and it's worse when you've got a group finance team who really knows how to count it properly, right? So I think for me, the biggest benefit has been we've moved to a world where, we had a massive on-prem installation. It was a fixed cost. You couldn't do much about it, to a world where we can constantly change as our business wants things to change. And every new module that you put in place, you can then upscale, downscale, like Jason was referring to. I think that's really powerful, the ability to choose literally every year how we are tweaking it, rather than an old model where you kind of locked yourself in for 5 or 6 or 7 years, depending on what physical infrastructure you put in place. So the choice has been really awesome.
And Rolf, I think let's just carry on from there. I think this word journey is a word that we've really used quite a lot over the session. So what's next in terms of ABSA's journey? You've landed SAP and AWS. This constant evolution we live in. What are you guys thinking about in terms of the future?
So obviously for us, the big thing is, we're live in our 2 biggest markets, which is Kenya and South Africa. We've got 8 other banks to go, so Botswana, Ghana, Mauritius, Seychelles, where we own all of our operations. So the next kind of 18 months for us is landing all of those. And I think, the comment Jason made early on, the other big thing is tweaking not only the efficiency but also the financial side of it. We've learned a lot in the last 18 months. Now we know how things work. We also know what goes wrong, because we've also had a few instances of spending a bit too much money in some places. But now as we roll to each country, it's getting a lot easier, and I think hopefully in about, 18 months' time, we'll have everybody on a hyperscaler running mostly out of Cape Town, which will be amazing, which is also a big factor for us with our regulators.
Most of our on-prem instances into the cloud. We're going to start to leverage SAP BTP soon. So I think as we evolve, also we're changing how we're using AWS as well.
Fantastic. So I think anybody that's in the SAP world at the moment, and we have a conversation that doesn't, introduce the topic of RISE is, might be sitting in the wrong room. So I think, Jason, it's a hot topic. SAP RISE. What's AWS's approach to partnering with SAP from a RISE perspective?
Okay, so we're now going on ad lib because I just wanted to address a couple of the points because they were fantastic points about cost containment, etc. And I just wanted to sort of describe this because one of the things, I was 13 years in SAP before I joined AWS for now 3.5 years, And it's one of the quirky things about working for AWS that we have a couple of things that we do, like we have a technical account manager role. And the technical account manager's role, one of the many things that they do is to reduce the price. Yeah. And what we do is we work and say, that instance type, why are you keeping it running? Yeah, and this is like, why? We're trying to reduce the price. Yeah, that's what we do at AWS. And the other thing is we've also got a well-architected review with an SAP lens on as well, which is also about helping customers contain costs, because you're absolutely right. If you don't govern it, the cost can get a little bit hairy, so you've got to have that governance in place. And the well-architected review thing also now covers sustainability as well, which is something that is becoming hot at top. I've heard it at a couple of the other events. But let's go back onto that core question. What I call native versus RISE. It certainly is a hot topic, correctly so. But AWS's approach is we're working with SAP. SAP, and we are therefore RISE inclined. What I mean by that is our go-to-market, our priority is to follow SAP, because the RISE offering is maturing, is getting more and more exciting. Some of the things that you can do, for example, with Signavio, which you get as part of the RISE proposition, whether it's process intelligence tooling, it's really unlocking the value of the SAP foundation. The other thing that I see that's going to happen is that, SAP and Christian Klein, they've really said very clear message. We're a cloud-first company. And what that means from our point of view, and probably from my personal opinion, is I think you'll start to see that some capability, some functionality is going to be available in cloud first versus perhaps on-premise first. So we've got to make sure that we're following the SAP strategy, and that is what we're doing within AWS. We've got organizations, other banking organizations in this country, which have got RISE on AWS. And I think we'll see a lot more of it. There are some significant benefits of moving down the RISE approach, both in terms of following the SAP strategy. The business cases that we've seen look sweet. They look positive in terms of, from the customer's point of view, of moving to RISE as well. So, to be super clear, AWS's strategy is that we're taking a RISE first strategy in terms of approaching it. And we just like we've said on this panel, we're talking with SAP, we're talking with AWS, and we're talking with the customers, transparent and clear and open. And we want what's best for the customers. We are customer first mentality. Always have been, always will be.
And I think that's a really good segue, into the next question for you, Jason. And it came up earlier, really around the cost of, transformation and migration in the previous session. It's a big transformation. I think if we, organizations like ABSA are bigger than most, but I think relative to any organization, these projects are significant. In line with AWS's customer first kind of philosophy and approach, how is AWS really supporting and investing in clients to realize their SAP, in cloud on AWS ambitions?
Yeah, it comes back to that question and around our solution called this MAP program that we have, Migration Acceleration Program or Accelerate Program. We've got some beautiful tooling in that program to help customers with that cost migration. And one of the important ones is that hump that I talked about earlier. Yeah, it exists. Yeah, don't go into this journey thinking that I have X amount of money at the moment, X is going to be, save 30%, save 40% in the future immediately, okay? No, I mean, when you look at the practical reality from an SAP point of view, life's not that simple in terms of moving to the cloud. So the long-term benefit is that cost reduction. We've got retail customers like Burberry that we just posted a reference site in the UK, cost reduction of 30% for the Burberry infrastructure they're running on SAP. So it does exist. But the initial side of that is that it is going to cost a little bit more than what you're doing at the moment, okay? And that's where we really support our customers by making it cost neutral. We believe it is possible to do a SAP to the cloud journey, okay, RISE or native for cost neutral. And that's what we strive to do from an AWS point of view, make that journey cost neutral in terms of flattening out that hump and make sure that we get to the dream, get to the bits that the CFOs like and the end customers like, we just start to see the decrease of OPEX costs going forward. So we're ready to take it on and bring the use cases and bring your business cases to us. We look forward to working with you on them.
Yeah, awesome. I think you've set everyone in the room a good challenge. So I think, the AWS team is with us. In the exhibition hall, we've got a great meeting room there. I think if anyone's interested in understanding a little bit more, reach out to Jason and the rest of the AWS team, and let's hold them to their word on cost neutrality. So thanks, Jace. And then I think, guys, we'll go to some questions shortly, but what are some of the key takeouts? And let's start with you, Rolf. You guys have been doing this for a while. If you were sitting, sitting with this audience, what are some of the key kind of takeouts that, you wish you had known that other organizations should consider on this journey?
Sure. Jason spoke earlier on, he speaks often about the bubble, and it's a very true thing. But I think the one thing that we started doing quite well, and I think we've carried on, and I would say to any organization to look at it even from the beginning, is what do you do with that implementation cost element? Because the infrastructure element sits there as a double bubble. But what we started doing with AWS really well is looking at the skill they have and effectively, in simple terms, and don't hate me for saying the next comment, is almost giving us that skill for free to migrate, right? Now, we've used AWS ProServe extensively through this journey. And, when you're sitting in front of your CFO and you're trying to explain the double bubble, but you can sit there and go, well, we're going to get 3 or 4 AWS expert guys for 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks for basically free in order to try and migrate us faster, then you hopefully get to eat into that bubble faster. So I think if there's any organization, looking to do this, I think leveraging off that element of skill that AWS has to make things go faster, to get rid of that bubble faster, is something I probably would have done a bit sooner. And when we did start doing it, the benefits came through quite quickly.
That's great. Thanks, Rolf. Roopa?
I think from my side is just to plan it, plan the migration carefully. Usually the first one is the biggest wobble. So give yourself that time. If you can, do it in a phased approach. It's a lot easier, less hassle. It took us longer to do the first one, but as we got used to the setups, working with AWS, things just started to fly. We started to deliver a lot easier, a lot faster. I think start small. I would say start small because you can scale up as you need it. So I think that's the great part. And if you're doing S4 migration, it's actually nicer to do it in parallel because you actually can keep your ECC instance running and you can take that data across to S4. So I think there's just a lot of benefits to it. And the second, I think the last one I'd say is make sure you're tagging and monitoring your costs really well. I think that one comes to bite you a lot in the end if you're not watching it very carefully. So make sure that you have monitored. You have a good team that's constantly looking at it. There's lots of tools that AWS offers. Use them. We're starting to see other tools that we can use within the AWS part, the backups, etc. There's a lot that we've benefited from learning from them together. I think we've done a very good case study, especially with our ECC6 instance on migrating large volumes of data, compressions of data. We've tested a lot, stress tested things across continents. So it's actually been, I mean, we've reduced the times like from days actually to just 3 days, and the biggest one took us 2 days. So I think that was phenomenal for us, something that would have taken us probably 2 to 3 weeks. We were able to migrate in under 2 days. Yeah.
Amazing. Thanks, Roopa. Jason, any closing thoughts from you before we go to the audience?
I think just to resonate with what the customer said for ABSA here, I mean, I absolutely agree in terms of the planning. You know, make sure that the SAP architecture on AWS is well thought through. And that's where AWS ProServe, we sometimes call it, or professional services, really can add value, and we want to add value, you know. Apologize for this especially, but we want skin in the game, yeah. We want to feel accountable as well for the success of this journey. And also combined with that, then what ABSA is doing with us is using our resident architecture capability. And it's a great service because it's triangulating dimension data, AWS and the customer is making sure that we're absolutely getting the best practices through the entire program. And no doubt, make sure that you get your planning right at the beginning and make sure things like the landing zone is set up correctly. Make sure the SAP architecture has been gone through the well-architected review process with us. And you'll be on for a good journey and you'll have a great experience. Get the foundations right.
Awesome. Thanks. Thank you so much to our panelists. So I'm going to open up to the audience. I'll walk around. I'll leave the mic up here with them. Any questions? Come on.
Thanks. Gerard Greiling from SEDA Development Bank in Botswana. 2 questions. And firstly, thanks for giving us insight into the essence of your program. It certainly sounds very interesting. I've got a question for ABSA and a question for AWS. Firstly, the question to ABSA. Maybe if you can give us maybe a little bit of insight into what business functionality you've been able to migrate to the cloud already. And does it include some core business, real-time, the sort of difficult things, banking type of things, or are those on the scale for into the future? And then the second question, so I do 2 questions now, and then the second question then for Jason will be: you've been talking about a lump in the beginning, but is there not also initially maybe a lump, but a little bit of a whale tail at the end? And the reason why I ask that is, all relationships start off very, very well, but you need to, in a business case, also plan for the day that, you want to move away from that cloud, or you may want to move to a different hyperscaler. And sometimes I think what I've seen is some cloud providers, it's actually very difficult to move away from them and get all your own data out of them, out of the day that you want, that the relationship may have soured, or you just want to move away. What will be your view on that? Is there a whale tail at the end? Thank you.
Okay, so I think the first one, I'll take the first one. So we moved our finances, so cost accounting and primary ledger, into S/4HANA, so that's real time with procurement. Our procurement systems are integrated with another system. So again, real time, we're looking at FBSL at the moment, we're implementing that. And as we go along, we will move the rest of our financial systems across to S4.
I think maybe just to touch on your other element of your question, I mean, we're not doing, let's call it debit card and credit card transactions kind of style. I mean, for us, as the bank being as big as it is, our journey was the finance, procurement, payroll lens across all 10 banks across the continent. So, I mean, if we say we're doing general ledger in S4, we're doing it for all the banks. That's not only South Africa, it's every bank on the continent that's ABSA Bank, So the scale of that is massive, because if you think about SA as just a standalone on its own, it's actually 10 banks elsewhere. It's ABSA Bank Kenya, it's ABSA Bank Botswana, and each of them come with their own 20, 30, 40,000 customers, depending on the size of the entity. So ours wasn't really about, the ATM transaction. Ours was that whole back-end story is all in HANA on AWS.
Thanks. and then the whale tail. So a couple of things is that AWS has put up its prices once. Okay, bold statement, factually, go fact check me. We haven't put our prices up once. In fact, we've reduced our prices 161 times, actually. So, you know, that's one thing is, and we call that the flywheel effect. You know, the more customers that are using the services, the granular services we have, obviously compute is a huge part of it, and that's where a lot of our price reductions have come. The more that we have a philosophy of not a short-term gain, but a long-term win. So the prices have never gone up from AWS's perspective in terms of the core foundations. You know, and maybe there might be some other hyperscalers out there where that's not true at the moment recently, okay? The other thing is, in fact, you talked about it at the moment, you've got to be well governed as an organization as well, because if you're not using this technology in the right way, it can get a bit scary, okay? You can suddenly unlock this capability of spinning up instances, and everybody spins up an instance. So you've got to have internal corporate governance behind that. And the third part of that is part of our DevOps tooling for SAP is it's automated a lot of that cost containment capability. So we can do startup shutdown instances, yeah? I don't know what particular industry you're in, but why keep your DevOps QA systems going at the weekend, yeah? Shut them down, you know, 8 o'clock or whatever on a Friday, spin them back up at 7 o'clock on the Monday and reduce the cost of those instances over the weekend as a rather sort of simplistic answer. So those are some of the things that you can do to contain the costs. You know, we have a lot of very happy customers around the world, which is why we're still #1 in the Gartner Magic Quadrant and have been for 13 years. So we're there for a reason, and it's because we make sure that we minimize/remove the point that you make in terms of the whale tail there. Yeah, I see it continuously going down.
Thank you. Any other questions in the room?
Good afternoon. My name is Nsakhiseng Pande from AECI. Having listening to you, I think I got a sense that your projects have ran seamlessly. And I'm finding it hard to believe because we all know when we do projects, things do go wrong. So what I just want to find out from you is that the results of your project having moved so seamlessly into when you're doing the migration, was that a reason of preparation, and how much preparation did it go into? And also, I just want to find out from you that did you have to do any data cleansing before you migrated the data?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. I think, again, because we did it in a phased approach, right? So it wasn't like doing a whole lot of things at the same time. We stuck at really core functionality moving across at a specific time. When doing that, obviously, we did a lot of testing, a lot of data cleansing. Actually, that's probably where most of the time went, is data cleansing. And even after you go live, if you can say the part that really caused a lot of chaos would be the data part. Technically, not really much of a challenge because I think we set up the base really well. We tested it really well in terms of dev and QA. We waited a long time in those environments, tested it, stress tested it. So I think those things prepared us for a go live, right? I think you have to be, there's a lot of data stuff, a lot of our infrastructure never really gave us an issue, so I think that was the best part. The reliability was great. And I think it was just the fact that we planned really well and we took a little longer in our test environment, right, before we went live, right? When things did go wrong, we fixed it then. We didn't, if it meant we had to push out a little bit, we pushed out a little bit. But the whole reason for this is we shouldn't go live in production because we can impact a lot of people, right? So I think we were very cognizant of that fact and we were very sure about what we're doing in testing. We also involved a lot of our business, and I think that's also very important. Like, we don't just do testing functional testing. We actually get user involvement. Even in country, it was where people actually went and physically tested. So it's really their buy-in that matters, because if you don't get that from in-country, for example, you're not going to succeed even when you roll it out. So I think that, if I answered it shortly.
Yeah, maybe just to add, I mean, we talk seamless, but it's been almost 2.5 years. So, I mean, we chose to do Kenya first. It was our biggest market outside of South Africa. If I look at, if I can emphasize Roopa's comments, I mean, we had Kenya in test for quite a long time before we eventually went live with Kenya. And it's been another, 14 months later that we only took South Africa live, right? Which is our biggest market. So the planning and prep is the key part, right? How you do that and how you map that out of the journey is what's made it so seamless. I mean, our next couple of rollouts are, like I said, 18 to 24 months to take all the other banks. So it's not something we're doing in 3 or 6 weeks kind of project. You can't on this size, at least that's, and that sort of careful planning is what's helped make it really seamless.
So I think the other point we should add is that we stuck to SAP standard, right? So it meant in the beginning we had to re-look at all our processes, remap everything, and that was where the time actually got taken. So how to align it with different countries, how to stick with a template, how to make sure we go back to SAP standard was probably the longest part of this journey.
Great, thanks. I'm going to take one last question over here.
Thanks. Dylan Evans, SAP Pioneer Country Manager. Hi, Roopa. Well done. And just a question in terms of your cloud strategy going forward. So you've obviously had this experience and you've learned a lot. It's been seamless, hard to believe in our industry, but fantastic and well done. What is your take on future application acquisition? So buying software into the future in terms of cloud. Because of this experience, is it now cloud first, or how are you going to deal with that? Thanks.
So ABSA has a cloud-first strategy, but it's not necessarily an AWS first, and I'm not criticizing Jason here. It completely depends on the business you're dealing with. So if I give you an example, in our compliance business, we've just gone 2 products which are software as a service from that particular vendor, but that product is what works for the compliance business, right? A lot of our other, like if you take our corporate bank who are doing stuff, they don't necessarily always do AWS first, but ABSA is a cloud strategy, particularly looking at what offerings customers have as a software as a service product. I mean, I'm not going to rattle off which vendors we're working with, but yeah, it's more try and get off on-prem. I mean, if anybody's driven on Samrand Avenue, you can see ABSA's big data center. It doesn't cost us a small amount of money. It's huge, right? So being able to move to different cloud providers, but also more whatever the product suits will go there. But definitely stay away from on-prem if possible. We've been down that road already.
Great. Thank you so much. And, just a huge thank you on behalf of everyone in the audience for your time. I will say, and I hope I say this willingly or openly on your behalf, like having known this panel for a while, any questions you have that, you want to come and, just have an offline conversation with, Roopa, Rolf, and Jason, I'm sure you guys will be, really open to that. They really are, great kind of thought leaders and sharing the journey that they've been on. So huge thanks to all of you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of today's sessions. Cheers.